There's a moment in every connection, a quiet, confusing shift, when someone you care about suddenly pulls away. The messages slow down. The energy changes. You feel that emotional temperature drop, and your mind starts racing for answers. But here's the truth. How you respond in that moment says more about your strength than his silence ever will. You don't need to chase validation. You don't need to fight for attention. What you need is control over your emotions, your reactions, and your peace. Because sometimes the most powerful move you can make is to do nothing at all. This isn't about playing games. It's about understanding emotional maturity, knowing when to speak, when to stay silent, and when to let someone's distance reveal what you were never meant to carry. So when a man distances himself from you and starts to ignore you, here's exactly what to do. When a man starts to distance himself, most people instantly fall into overthinking. You start replaying every conversation, every text, every glance, searching for that one moment where things shifted. You wonder if you said something wrong, if you came off too strong, or if you missed a sign. But the truth is, distance doesn't always come from something you did. Sometimes it's not about you at all. It's about what's going on inside him. The space he's creating might be confusion, fear, stress, emotional overload, or simply his way of figuring things out. And your job isn't to chase clarity from someone who can't even find it within themselves. That's where most people get it wrong. They try to close the gap immediately to fix what they think is broken. They send longer messages, call more often, post things that might get his attention, all in an effort to get a reaction, to get reassurance that they still matter. But what you're really doing is feeding into the very thing that's pushing him further away. Because when you act from anxiety, you give your power away. You start to believe that his attention equals your worth, that his silence defines your value. And that's the trap you need to avoid. When someone distances themselves, that pause is not a punishment. It's a mirror. It shows you what you still need to work on inside yourself. It reflects your emotional triggers, your attachment, your fear of being left behind. You can either let those emotions control you, or you can use that space to grow through them. The pause gives you a chance to see how strong you've become, how much emotional control you really have. Because growth doesn't happen when everything feels secure. Growth happens in the moments when you're not chosen, not texted, not called, and you still choose peace over panic. You have to learn that space can be healthy. Silence doesn't always mean rejection. Sometimes it's just a reset. It gives both people a chance to breathe, to step back from the noise, to see things clearly without emotions clouding the view. It's not your job to fill every quiet moment with explanations or effort. It's your job to protect your peace while the other person figures themselves out. When you stop chasing closure and start embracing clarity, everything changes. You stop trying to decode every move and instead focus on your own energy. The pause becomes a moment of reflection, not rejection. You begin to see that a man's distance doesn't automatically mean disinterest. It can simply mean he's overwhelmed, unsure, or emotionally blocked. But no matter the reason, your stability remains the same. You don't need to prove your value through constant communication. You prove it through calm, through patience, through the ability to remain centered even when things feel uncertain. The distance teaches you who you are when things don't go your way. It reveals whether you're led by fear or by faith in your own worth. Because the more you chase, the further you drift from your peace. But the more you pause, the more you realize that your emotional response is the only thing you can control. The space between you becomes a test, not of his loyalty, but of your emotional strength. And that's the moment when you discover what self-respect truly looks like. When someone pulls away from you, the instinct to react is strong. You want to reach out, to explain, to fix, to remind them of what you share. But the truth is, reacting out of emotion usually does more harm than good. It's natural to feel confusion or frustration when someone starts ignoring you, but what separates maturity from desperation is how you choose to respond in that silence. The people who carry emotional strength don't try to control the situation, they control themselves. They understand that not every action deserves a reaction, and not every distance needs to be filled with words. Sometimes the best thing you can do is to stay still and let silence speak for you. Emotional maturity is about learning to pause before you respond. It's realizing that your calm is louder than your panic. When a man withdraws, what he notices more than your words is your energy. If he feels your anxiety, your need for reassurance, your fear of being left, he feels control shifting toward him, even unintentionally. But when you remain composed, when your tone stays steady and your attitude stays graceful, you send a much stronger message. You're saying, I'm not defined by how close or distant you are. I'm defined by my own peace. That kind of presence commands respect without a single word. You see, people don't remember what you texted them in moments of tension. They remember how you made them feel. Did you add pressure, or did you create space? Did you act out of insecurity or out of self-respect? Responding with emotional maturity doesn't mean you suppress your feelings. It means you manage them. You can acknowledge your disappointment privately while still choosing not to react impulsively. You can care deeply and still stay detached enough to protect your peace. That's not indifference. That's discipline. When you choose not to chase after someone who's distancing themselves, you're not losing anything. You're gaining control over your emotions. You're reclaiming the power you gave away when you tied your peace to their presence. Emotional maturity looks like taking a deep breath before responding, asking yourself what outcome you really want, and then deciding whether silence or calm communication serves you better. Because not everything deserves your energy. Sometimes your silence is the most powerful statement you can make. It's not about ignoring back. It's about preserving your emotional balance. When you respond with calm instead of chaos, you change the dynamic completely. The other person can feel it. They notice that their distance didn't break you. They see that you didn't spiral, didn't chase, didn't fall apart. And that's when curiosity builds. That's when respect grows. Because composure is magnetic. It pulls people toward you without effort. You don't need to beg for attention when your energy speaks confidence. Emotional maturity also means you know when to speak and when to stay silent. You don't send paragraphs trying to explain yourself to someone who's not listening. You don't try to convince someone of your worth. You simply align your actions with your peace. And sometimes that looks like not responding at all. Not because you don't care, but because you understand that maturity is measured by restraint. You refuse to fight for connection with someone who's choosing distance. You let them go through whatever they need to figure out, and in the meantime, you protect your peace by staying centered. Responding with emotional maturity means you stop reacting to other people's moods. You stop letting their inconsistency pull you out of alignment. You no longer hand over control of your happiness to someone else's silence. You learn to sit with discomfort without rushing to fix it. Because sometimes your power isn't in saying something. It's in staying calm enough to show that you don't need to. When someone steps back from you, it's easy to get trapped in the emptiness they leave behind. You start focusing on their silence, on what they're doing, on whether they're thinking about you. That kind of focus slowly drains your energy because it shifts all your attention outward instead of inward. The truth is, when someone disconnects, the most powerful thing you can do isn't to chase after them. It's to reconnect with yourself. That means redirecting the energy you once poured into the relationship back into your own growth, your own healing, and your own peace. You have to understand that your world doesn't stop because someone else walked away. Your worth doesn't shrink just because someone couldn't see it. When you stop chasing explanations and start investing in your own energy, everything begins to shift. Instead of sitting in silence, waiting for a reply, you start showing up for yourself again, emotionally, mentally, and physically. You start doing the things that bring you peace, the things that remind you of who you were before you started losing yourself in someone else's presence. When you focus on yourself, you reclaim control. You stop letting someone's distance dictate your emotional rhythm. You realize that you are still whole, still capable, still valuable, even without their validation. That kind of self-focus doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring smarter. You stop trying to convince someone to see your value and start living in a way that proves you already know it. You stop replaying conversations and start rewriting your mindset. You take that emotional space and fill it with things that make you feel alive again. Sometimes people pull away because they're unsure of what they want. But that doesn't mean you have to lose yourself while they figure it out. The best thing you can do in that space is to stay grounded. Get back into your routine, the one that centers you and keeps your emotions steady. Go for that morning walk. Pour into your work. Spend time with people who pour into you. When your energy shifts from trying to understand them to understanding yourself, you become untouchable. Your peace stops depending on what someone else does or doesn't do. You also begin to see patterns clearly when you're centered. When you're emotionally attached, you view everything through fear. Fear of loss, fear of rejection, fear of being replaced. But when you step back and reconnect with yourself, you start seeing the situation for what it is, not what you're afraid it might be. That's where wisdom grows. You start noticing whether someone's distance comes from confusion or from disinterest. And instead of trying to fix them, you focus on what you can control: your reaction, your boundaries, your healing. The moment you shift focus inward, you begin to glow differently. Your energy becomes lighter, calmer, more secure. And people can feel that. They notice when you stop chasing, when you stop begging for clarity, when you start moving in peace. That kind of self-assured energy makes them rethink their actions because they see that you were never waiting. You were growing. You were never desperate for them to come back. You were becoming better for yourself. Reconnecting with your own energy means you stop depending on others to make you feel whole. You stop giving away the parts of you that were meant to be protected. You build emotional balance. The kind that stays steady no matter who comes or goes. You remind yourself that your identity isn't tied to whether someone stays. It's rooted in how deeply you know yourself. That's why focusing on your own energy during someone's silence is so important, because the peace you build in that quiet will become your strength long after the noise returns. And sometimes when you start doing that, when you redirect your focus, when you become grounded, when you protect your peace, you realize something powerful. You didn't lose them. You simply found yourself again. When someone starts to pull away, it's natural to want answers right away. You want to know why things suddenly feel different, why their words don't match their actions anymore, and why the warmth you once felt has turned cold. But here's what most people never realize. Time and silence are the most revealing things in any relationship. They tell you everything you need to know, even when words don't. When a man distances himself, the best thing you can do is let that distance play out. Don't rush to close the gap. Don't force a conversation he's not ready for, and don't chase closure from someone who isn't giving clarity. Because the truth always shows itself in how someone handles your absence. When you give space, you give truth room to breathe. If someone truly values you, that distance will create awareness. They'll start to notice the void you left behind. They'll think about the peace, the effort, the presence you brought into their life. And if they don't, that's your answer too. It's not your job to remind someone of your value. Their actions in your silence will reveal whether they ever saw it. Let the distance define what's real. If a person can stay away without effort, without reaching out, without showing any concern, that silence speaks louder than anything they could ever say. You don't need to beg for clarity when absence already gives it. Silence is not punishment. It's a test of emotional truth. When you pull back your energy, you get to see what was genuine and what was built on convenience. You start to understand who really cared and who was just comfortable with your effort. It's in that space where people reveal their true intentions. Some will return with sincerity, realizing what they almost lost. Others will drift away completely, showing you they were only there for what you gave, not who you are. Either way, their actions during the distance become your clarity. You don't have to overanalyze or interpret mixed signals. Just watch what happens when you stop reaching out. That's where the truth lies. Letting the distance define the truth also means learning to trust timing. Not everything unfolds when you want it to. Sometimes you need to allow the silence to stretch long enough to reveal real character. You might feel uncomfortable waiting, but that's where strength is built. Because in that waiting, you're teaching yourself emotional discipline. The ability to stay still without needing instant reassurance. You start realizing that patience is not weakness, it's power. You're not waiting for someone to choose you. You're watching to see whether they even deserve to. The distance also clarifies your own emotions. It shows you how much peace you've built within yourself. If you find yourself crumbling without communication, it's a sign that you've tied too much of your emotional stability to another person. But if you can stay calm, grounded, and clear, headed during that silence, you've grown. You've learned how to hold yourself together when things feel uncertain. You've learned that love without peace isn't love worth keeping. The space between you becomes a mirror that reflects both of your emotional maturity. It reveals whether the connection was built on security or on fear. There's also something deeply freeing about not forcing outcomes. When you stop chasing, you make room for truth. The people meant to be in your life will naturally move back toward you, not because you pushed, but because they felt the authenticity of your energy. And those who don't return, that's not a loss, it's a redirection. You're being protected from a version of love that wasn't ready to meet you at the level you've grown into. So, the silence isn't empty. It's doing its work. It's clearing away what isn't aligned with you anymore. Letting distance define the truth takes courage. It means you trust that what's real won't need to be forced. You stop chasing explanations and start allowing clarity to come to you. Because it always does. Maybe not in the timing you hoped for, but in the way you needed most. People can only pretend for so long. Their consistency or lack of it always tells the story. When a man distances himself, his next move will show you everything. Will he come back with accountability and intention? Or will he stay gone? Because the connection was only meant to teach you something about yourself. The silence will answer that for you, and it always does with more honesty than words ever could. When someone distances themselves from you, it's easy to believe you need to do more, to fix it, to prove your worth, to make them stay. But real strength isn't found in chasing clarity from someone who's pulling away. It's found in how calmly you hold yourself together when everything feels uncertain. The space they create isn't meant to break you, it's meant to build you. It shows you where your peace truly comes from, what parts of you still need healing, and how much control you really have over your emotions. You learn that the pause is a mirror. It reflects your growth, your patience, and your emotional intelligence. You realize that not every shift in connection is rejection. Sometimes it's redirection. Sometimes it's just life showing you where to stop pouring energy that's not being matched. You stop needing to react because you understand that silence is also a response and peace is also a choice. The person who can remain calm during emotional chaos is the one who truly understands their value. When you choose composure over reaction, you change everything. You stop giving people the power to decide how you feel. You stop measuring your worth by someone else's attention. And that's when your confidence becomes unshakable, because it no longer depends on anyone but you. You learn that real love, real connection, doesn't need to be chased. It flows naturally between two people who both want to be there. So if a man distances himself and begins to ignore you, let him. Not from bitterness, but from balance. Let him go figure out whatever he needs to figure out while you focus on continuing to grow into the version of yourself that's whole, grounded, and peaceful. Because the moment you stop trying to control the outcome, life starts aligning the right people, the right peace, and the right love toward you, all without you having to force a single thing.